What is going on, Optimistic Fan Club? We are here. We are back with some big breaking major news. You've probably seen it already by the time this video is posted, but Aaron Rodgers has signed a one-year deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And boy, do I have some opinions on this. We're going to dive into that, some other small things for the Browns fans tuning in, which is the usual demographic. We're going to be going through our 5 Browns with the most to gain, because something I've really been thinking about. There is a ton of turnover potentially on the Browns in 2026, and there are a lot of guys with a lot to gain. So we're going to be talking about that. But first and foremost, Aaron Rodgers. Let's get into it. This is the Optimistic Fan Club, baby. The bell has sounded. It is time. So, as we said, Aaron Rodgers has signed his one-year deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. This was, when we say breaking news, it's breaking because it finally happened. Everyone expected this to be the spot for him. It's a lot of the reasoning for why the Steelers made certain moves or didn't make certain moves through the offseason, the trading of George Pickens, the passing up of Shedeur Sanders. I think a lot of that could be tied to this decision. Aaron Rodgers wanted things a certain way. And that's not outlandish to assume, because that is the way Aaron Rodgers has operated in his career. He's really one of the few guys, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, and Aaron Rodgers, who have had the ability to be de facto GMs when it comes to certain guys or having a certain amount of input the way a team builds out its coaching staff, approaches the draft, or attacks free agents, or even trades in the case of Davante Adams to New York from the Raiders. But this is interesting because this is the first time the Steelers have really made a move like this in my career. The Steelers have always had high-profile players since I was growing up. I was born in 95, probably like a lot of people in the age demo watching this show. So the Steelers have basically always been good our entire lives. From Bill Cowher, that team that beat the Seahawks in the Super Bowl with Hines Ward, to the team that Mike Tomlin ultimately took over when they beat the Cardinals in the all-time greatest, my favorite Super Bowl that we've ever seen. But then they go on, they play Aaron Rodgers in the Super Bowl down the line. Aaron Rodgers wins. There's this sense that he is the next great. It was already pretty much on display in the seasons leading up to that Super Bowl victory, but just in terms of his pure passing ability, him coming in and succeeding Brett Favre, all the signs were pointing to Aaron Rodgers is going to have an amazing, illustrious, unstoppable career. It ultimately doesn't work out that way. It goes 1-5 in NFC Championship games. It ends semi-ugly with him basically forcing his move to the Jets, trying to get away from Matt LaFleur, Brian Gutekunst, the GM in Green Bay. And it just wasn't the picture perfect send-off that you would have expected from a guy who spent 15 plus years with one team. And that's just the way that Aaron Rodgers has been really over the final third of his NFL football life. He's been prickly. He's been hard to work with. He's wanted things done a certain way, and he hasn't necessarily done a great job in not throwing his teammates and coaches and even family under the bus. He's a complicated dude. If there's anyone who could handle a complicated dude, it's Mike Tomlin, but he hasn't had to do it at the quarterback position before. That is what makes this so different and what makes this so risky for the Steelers. And if I was a Steelers fan, which I am not, obviously, I'm a Browns fan, I can admit that, so there's probably biases baked into this, but I have held strong on my opinions of Aaron Rodgers my entire life, dating back to high school. I always felt he was smug. I always felt he was unapproachable, that he wasn't the kind of leader that a quarterback needs to be great, the way that Tom Brady was. When you have such a shining example with the greatest of all time, it's easy to juxtapose another amazing talent, but unequally impressive career. And that's the thing with Aaron Rodgers. He is criminally underachieved in my point of view. And that's going to be a larger video that I'm currently working on. I've just finished reading Ian O'Connor's book, Aaron Rodgers Out of the Darkness, or Out of the Darkness, The Mystery of Aaron Rodgers. It's been a very solid read so far, but I'm almost through that, and there is a larger video coming. That's not necessarily what this is about. We're here to talk about why this will or won't work for the Steelers, because I'm not saying it won't work. Aaron Rodgers, I think that so much was made with his physical decline last year. I think the media took that and ran with it. But to me, it's like when you turn the film on, this guy's still making elite high-level throws, high-level plays consistently over and over and over. He threw 28 touchdowns, 11 picks. That is a very good season from a 40-year-old quarterback. That's a very good season for most quarterbacks. That is still top 15 across the league. Do you got to be better than top 15 to win the Super Bowl? I mean, I don't know, maybe not for the Steelers. Their defense is so great. They always show up. They always have tide-turning miracle moments built into them. Their special teams are right up there near the top. They've had everything they needed besides a quarterback since Big Ben retired. And even in the last few seasons of Big Ben's career, he just wasn't the same guy, and they couldn't maximize what they had. Now, though, I think Aaron Rodgers is a better player than Big Ben was at the end of his career, and I do think that it was overblown, the physical decline that Aaron Rodgers had. Even post-Achilles, like, he wasn't what Kirk Cousins was post-Achilles. And Aaron Rodgers post-Achilles, I think, is still a better athlete and moves better in the pocket than Kirk Cousins did in his prime. So that's a guy who can still win from the pocket. He can still succeed. And there's no reason, logically or illogically, on paper, why this team couldn't be extremely talented. But the Super Bowl is what this team is looking for. Cam Hayward, this is his last stop. It's probably his last season. TJ Watt, they're going to figure out a way through the whole contract issue, but he's also 31 years old. They've loaded up with a lot of good talent. They've rebuilt the offensive line. They just drafted Caleb Johnson, but they cashed in on guys like DK Metcalf, who's going on to his third contract. He's getting older, a bigger physical player. Pat Freiermuth has really become a veteran within this team. So they're trying to win right now, and it's going to be this season that they try to do it. I wouldn't be surprised if there's another big move that they make before the season starts that really signals like this is the year. That's a lot of speculation, but I think if you just look at the contracts, the ages, that's what this is telling you. This is the year. Mike Tomlin wants this to be it. There's not a ton of room for a rebuild. There's not a ton of hope for 5 years down the line like other teams have positioned themselves. This is it. But here's the thing. I was really going through all this. Again, like I said, I'm reading this Aaron Rodgers book. And what has consistently popped up just within the anecdotes and the reports and everything baked into Ian O'Connor's book is that, yes, Aaron Rodgers is prickly. He is very particular about his inner circle, about the way he wants to be a coach, about the way he wants his team to be built around him, and the level to which he wants to be involved in developing relationships with younger receivers, showing up to mini camps, all these smaller pieces. He wants the best from everyone else, and he definitely demands it and shows up while he's there, but he doesn't necessarily take the extra steps it takes to galvanize a team and bring people together. He actually does the opposite. He threw Matt LaFleur under the bus after his final game, after Aaron Rodgers' final game with the Detroit Lions. He said, yeah, there's a couple calls that kind of hurt in retrospect. That's a paraphrase, but he basically said the last 3 calls on that drive to try and win it were bad. Meanwhile, Aaron Rodgers could have run for a touchdown in that game and in a previous make or break game that the Packers had to have in a playoff run. And he didn't do it. It's like he missed plays as well, but he doesn't really acknowledge that to the extent that a franchise quarterback and a leader of a team, more importantly, needs to make. Like, he does not take ownership for the things that really, really matter. And That was consistent and has been consistent throughout his entire career. When you read this book, again, you see it over and over and over and over. He likes to shift the blame, and he also wants to be a renegade and do his own thing. A lot of the issues that came up at the end of his tenure with Green Bay, aside from, like we mentioned, not showing up to OTAs and minicamp, the offseason programs, when he had all new rookie receivers and Devontae Adams had been moved to the Raiders, he didn't show up. He didn't develop that rapport. So it took a long time to get on the same page. And like Christian Watson, was, aside from injuries, has shown that he could be a very viable NFL receiver. Sure, he dropped a big play as a rookie, but again, he's a rookie. And if Aaron Rodgers is there in the offseason program to develop and get that chemistry, they probably go on to a better start and don't get knocked out in a make or break game in week 17 to the Lions. But this is the point. You saw a drop off with Aaron Rodgers in that final season because of the things that we mentioned with the rookie receivers and whatnot, but because he started freelancing more and more and more. He felt that it was totally cool and within his abilities to take over the offense and check out of calls at the line of scrimmage, go into his own plays, the things that he wanted to run, check into, quick slants, bubble screens, all these little things where he felt he could diagnose at the line of scrimmage better than the play was called, and they'd run with that. And it left people, especially young players who he did not spend the time to create this rapport with, to be able to do the stuff on the fly without mistakes. And then he would get upset when they couldn't execute. Again, it's hard enough as a rookie receiver to step into the NFL and succeed and learn a playbook. But now you're dealing with this guy who's really the guy who punches your ticket to whether or not you're going to be successful and stay on the team. He's got his own version of the playbook going on. So you had that, and that's why it really didn't work out that last season. There were also injuries and other things as well, but that was a big piece of it. And Aaron Rodgers, we talk about how great he was, and he absolutely was great. I think he's the best pure thrower of the football we've ever seen and maybe ever will see. But we ignore the fact that he had great offensive coaching for the majority of his career. Say what you will about Mike McCarthy. He was integral in winning that Super Bowl with Green Bay. He led great teams offensively while he was the head coach in Green Bay. Maybe not towards the end, but believe me, Aaron Rodgers, when you read this book, had a part to play in some of that decline. A lot of it was justified in terms of not taking big chances. Like go back to the 2014 NFC Championship. There were multiple times Mike McCarthy should have gone for it. But again, Aaron Rodgers didn't necessarily play the most lights out game. That last drive where he marches down the field and sends it to OT, a thing of beauty. But there were a lot of points left on that field because of decisions and throws and plays that Aaron Rodgers didn't make. But then when he goes to New York, who's his offensive coordinator? Nathaniel Hackett. And Nathaniel Hackett was his offensive coordinator when he was in Green Bay from 2019 to 21. But this is the thing. He wasn't calling plays. It was Matt LaFleur. And Matt LaFleur has stayed as the play caller through all of this. So what was Nathaniel Hackett other than a drinking buddy, as he's been described in the past by various media outlets and reports? He really wasn't much more, because Aaron Rodgers, as described once again by Ian O'Connor, is the de facto offensive coordinator on the New York Jets, or was when he was on the New York Jets. Everything is being run to his liking. Everything is being operated to his liking. And what you saw with that, aside from the Achilles tear season, was less production. And again, although the numbers were good and although he showed the flashes of the physical talent still being there, which again, I've argued in this video that he absolutely still has a talent, he was not as effective because he was doing his own thing. Aaron Rodgers thinks he knows better than everyone, better than his family, better than his coaches, better than his teammates, better than everyone. He has an incomprehensibly large chip on his shoulder for a guy who really shouldn't. He acts like he was disrespected to this level that Tom Brady was, being pick 199, when it isn't like that. He was what, pick 26, pick 23? It's not like that. Alex Smith was taken ahead of him, probably because they knew there was something quirky about the way Aaron Rodgers carried himself. That's probably what it comes down to, because you've never heard anything like this. Alex Smith, absolutely not as talented. But you know, Alex Smith is not a pain in the ass or a headache. Aaron Rodgers is that and has always been that through his career. And I'm telling you, don't take it from me. Read this book and you read between the lines. With all that being said, with Aaron Rodgers being a guy who likes to write his own ticket and likes to call his own plays at the line and run the offense he wants to run, how's that going to work with Arthur Smith? Arthur Smith, the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive coordinator, the former head coach and play caller of the Atlanta Falcons, who made Bijan Robinson disappear. One of the great running back talents we've seen come out of the draft. Barely used him relative to how he was used last year. It was more Tyler Algier, or way too evenly split between those guys. When you saw how talented the other one was, catching out of the backfield, the explosive run ability. Tyler Algier is no scrub. He's a very good running back, but he's not Bijan Robinson. Bijan Robinson will turn out to be a Saquon Barkley type player. Maybe not completely or getting a 2,000-yard season in his career, but he is that type of guy, a guy who can motor your offense and be a significant game changer. He also really did a lot to cut Kyle Pitts out of game plans. And not that these things are being done nefariously, but Arthur Smith is a perfect example of a guy who overthinks it. He goes with the X's and O's more than the Jimmys and Joes. That's the kind of guy that he is. So how is that going to work when you have that immovable force with the ego and demands of Aaron Rodgers? I'm sure everything is hunky-dory. Everything is good right now as it sits within the Pittsburgh organization, and that Arthur Smith and Aaron Rodgers are feeling good about each other. But man, come September, come the first couple headaches, come the first few bad calls that Aaron Rodgers doesn't like, you think he's just going to bite his tongue? Maybe all of the retreats and the mindfulness and everything will amount to a guy who knows how to better compose and carry himself at the podium. But that's a big if. That's a big risk. And that's a risk that we haven't seen the Steelers as an organization really take in my lifetime. So if it works, it will be because Aaron Rodgers has changed and he is ready to be a leader of men, and he's not going to clash with people within the organization and Arthur Smith in particular. That will be why it works. If it doesn't, it's going to be because, well, he does throw people under the bus, because he creates division in a locker room, not because of his play, because it's usually pretty damn stellar, but because he isolates people. And you know, I should note this. In the Ian O'Connor book, he says, like, outside of two guys, basically, I've never seen any teammate call him a bad teammate. But he is absolutely prickly and rubs people the wrong way. And I think that a part of that perception as a teammate has been because he's been so successful in leading teams to be winners, like a lot of 10+ win seasons on his resume. But are people going to have that patience after seeing what he's put on tape in terms of team outcome with the Jets last season? But I think the final thing that I'll say on that is what's funny is that the Steelers, if they didn't draft Shedeur, if the reason why they didn't draft Shedeur wasn't because Aaron Rodgers was like, don't draft this guy, if that is just a conspiracy theory, and the reason why they didn't draft Shedeur was because they were worried about the off-field drama and Dion and this and that. It's like, boy, are they going to be shocked to realize that they just signed the most dramatic, unhinged guy at quarterback that the NFL has maybe ever seen in terms of being that good of an on-field product. They just signed that guy who spends his off time talking live on ESPN, saying some of the craziest stuff you'll ever hear. So that is going to be interesting. And really, if the Steelers did not draft Shedeur because they're worried about off-field stuff, it's like, what did you just do in bringing in Aaron Rodgers? So we will see. It's going to be very interesting. And again, it's going to be a fun team to watch. I am not ruling them out from being successful. So don't take this as a receipt that it's like, haha, I got it wrong. It absolutely could succeed. I think Mike Tomlin's a great coach and Aaron Rodgers is a great player. My specific reservations come between Arthur Smith, Aaron Rodgers, and him freelancing and that creating tension in the building that ultimately kills a run at the end of a long, arduous season. So we're going to see. But Aaron Rodgers is now in Pittsburgh. Sorry for the stuttered Taco Bell bell. Okay, now I want to talk about something else here. Now this is for the Browns fans, you who stuck around, and anyone else who is interested in that team in Ohio. So I saw on Twitter, as a lot of people probably did, Dawand Jones has lost a ton of weight. A ton meaning probably 20, 25 pounds. And a lot of it is body fat. He's looking good. He's still enormous. He's like still 375 pounds. He is huge. But last year he ballooned up and everyone noticed. It clearly affected his play. And he had a big backslide from 2023 to 2024. When Jack Conklin went down and Dawand took over, Dawand had some really good moments. He locked down TJ Watt in that November game. That poster's from that game. He played really well. Ultimately, he winds up getting injured. He doesn't finish the season, comes back the next year. Bill Callahan's gone. He's heavier. He isn't moving as well and gets put on the bench up until Jed Wills and the whole left tackle debacle completely unravels. The Browns' hands were forced. They put him there and he started to perform well. Maybe he had a bit of a scared straight moment, but he started to play well. Then again, he gets injured. That now left me with seeing the moves that he made, losing that weight, start to go through and be like, who are the guys with the most to gain this season? Who can like solidify roster spots and whose circumstances relative to the position that they play really will leave them at a point where they're like cashing in and making huge money down the line, or will leave the Browns looking for answers, trying to replace him in the draft over the next 2 seasons. So we're going to go through the top 5. Dawand Jones is number 1. Like we mentioned, bad 2024, looking for a big rebound. Jed Wills is gone. The Browns do not have a dedicated left tackle. The only other tackle who could really be competing is a utility swing guy, Cornelius Lucas. He is older. He's 33 years old. He is not the future. Dawand Jones has the opportunity this season, if he comes out, if he performs well enough, to solidify that spot. And that is really the best possible outcome for the Browns for multiple reasons. The most important being that left tackle is a pricey position when it comes to draft. That is usually a first round pick. So for the Browns, if they don't have to burn one of those 2 first round picks next year, they can use that any way they want. And that is extremely valuable. You also have them under contract, I believe, until 2027. And with that being said, you have cheap talent at that spot for at least 2 more years. And with that being said, if he does perform well, if he can solidify it this year and he has a good year the following season, he has the chance to make the industry average for the top of the line is $28 million with like $100 to $140 million total over 4 to 5 years. Dawand Jones could be a $28 million man, and he's a mid-round draft pick at this point on a very cheap salary. He has an enormous amount of generational wealth changing money just sitting there. So if he can grasp this, he is just going to be the answer for the first time since Joe Thomas. So he has so much to gain or lose in this season. He already saw Jed Wills completely piss his career away and miss out on hundreds of millions of dollars. Dawand Jones has the opportunity to seize this. I really hope he does. It would be the best case scenario for the Browns. I think that he's a fan favorite because of his size and his energy, the way he plays the game. It's just going to really rest on whether or not he can stay healthy. And if post Andy Dickerson, this new offensive line coach and unit, if they can get him back to where he was finishing the year in 2024 before he was injured, and really the level he was playing on in 2023. So there's a lot of what ifs, but I think that he is a guy where you see the work he did in the offseason. That's an indication that he's locked in, obviously. But when you know that you've put the work in, it helps you play with more confidence, and that confidence shines through and translates to on-field success in game time. So Dawand Jones is the first guy who I think has the most to gain. Second, Martin Emerson. Martin Emerson is very similar to Dawand Jones in the sense that early on, it looked like this guy was a lock. He was just the truth, the answer, the perfect pairing to go with Denzel Ward. He's the reason why they kicked Greg Newsome inside. He was just that talented. He was a better option for covering outside receivers, long, physical, little skinny in terms of defining him as undersized. It's probably more just because he's lanky than anything. But the guy showed up and he had 15 pass breakups and 4 interceptions in 2023. He was a big part in Jim Schwartz's first year in Cleveland in being as dominant as they were. They were number one against the pass. He was a huge piece of that puzzle. Also, when Denzel Ward went down, you felt like you had a guy who could realistically lock up the other team's number one receiver, or at least put up a damn good fight game to game. That was not the case in 2024. Enormous backslide. I believe he had a 47.9 PFF grade. Really, really bad in coverage. The only highlight was his tackling and run defense later on towards the end of the season. But that's not what you're asking for. That's an aspect of being a great corner, but that's not what the Browns needed. They needed a better guy against the pass. And Jim Schwartz had a really good quote, just kind of summing up why he felt it happened. He said, "The biggest thing has just been finishing at the ball. There's a lot of metrics that his coverage has been just as tight this year as last year, but there's a little better finish at the ball. So that's got to be a point of emphasis." And I think that's a lot of what a season comes down to. This is a game of inches at the end of the day. And it's true on every given play. There's multiple moments, and you could run the tape where it looks like it's going to be a pass breakup or a pick, but Martin Emerson is getting mossed. Malik Neighbors really did him dirty early in the year last year. And Martin Emerson said, it's like, I think some of those plays lingered with me a little bit too long, and it killed my swagger and my confidence. And those things compound, and over the course of a year, you see this enormous backslide. But ultimately, the 2 years prior, his rookie year and sophomore year, were not really defined by that kind of play. It was the polar opposite. So Martin Emerson this year has an unbelievable amount to gain, because in 2026, he's going to be a free agent, and they have to determine, do we roll with him or do we roll with Greg Newsome? Is one of these guys a trade asset, or is one of these guys going to get locked up on a long-term contract to be the opposite of Denzel Ward on a hopeful Super Bowl push over the next few years? There's a lot of what ifs. It's very dependent on performance, the way the ball bounces a couple times, but Martin Emerson has a ton to gain. And you would really hate to see a guy who showed so much promise not be signed to a second contract by the team who drafted him. So Martin Emerson is the next guy who I believe has the most to gain this year. The next one is going to be 2 guys, and you're going to understand why. Because they both are playing in the same unit. So Luke Wypler and Zach Zinter. We haven't really seen much of these guys play. Really none of Luke Wypler. Zach Zinter had some starts last year. He did not measure up. He got dog walked against teams like Washington. It was not good. He seemed undersized. He was also coming back of a bad leg injury. Luke Wypler also missed the whole season. He had an injury. And I think also not having Bill Callahan, who all these other Browns draftees and free agents have had coming into the Browns system, really hurt these guys. So with Luke Wypler and Zach Zinter, they have an enormous amount to gain, because Ethan Posich, Joel Bitonio, and Wyatt Teller are all free agents in 2026. You could add Tevin Jenkins into this group as well, but Wypler and Zinter have much more time left on their contracts. Jenkins is a 1-year deal. So with that being said, the Browns need to know if either of these guys are going to be the successor. If Luke Wypler gets the opportunity to play and he shows out, he is going to be the center in 2026. If Zach Zinter comes out and he plays well, he is going to be the swing man. He's going to be either that right guard or that left guard, but depending on what happens, because they could re-sign Wyatt Teller to a longer contract extension. They might want to keep him until he's 34, like Joel Bitonio. But Joel Bitonio, I really do believe this is his last year in the NFL, barring some sort of crazy indication that Cleveland could realistically compete for a Super Bowl next year. And that is a big what if. So I think in most cases, this is going to be Bitonio's last year. These guys have to step up, because if not, similar to the case of Martin Emerson and Dawand Jones, it's like, if you don't have this ironed out with these guys, and if they can't make a significant step this year once their opportunities come, which will come, because the Browns offensive line always gets banged up at some point. Like, offensive linemen all get a chance to play usually throughout a year because it's such a high rate of injury position. The trenches are dirty. Bitonio and Teller are getting older. Posich has had his times of being injured where Nick Harris had to come in back when he was on the team. Wypler and Zinter will get their opportunity. It's just a matter of what they do with it. So to have that covered, once again, on cheap, young rookie contracts is going to help you so much. And once again, all of that draft equity that you have next year can be used to address things like really the offensive weaponry, addressing certain needs in the back end of the defense, getting a safety to run with Grant Delpit. There's a lot that can be done, and I don't think that they necessarily want to burn it to try and get offensive linemen and turn that unit around quickly. So Luke Wypler and Zach Zinter have so much to gain, and the Browns have a ton to gain, and should really be hoping that they turn out to be the guys. So moving on, in a similar vein, we got two guys together once again for the same reason. They're working in the same unit. They're platooning. Isaiah McGuire and Alex Wright. The way that the Browns have approached the defensive end and edge rusher position has been Myles Garrett is the guy. He's always going to be the guy. And then go get a high profile free agent to flank him. It started with Olivier Vernon. Then it moved on to Jadeveon Clowney and really, hit a fever pitch. It just did not work. He was dramatic, but they kept him around for a few seasons because he was still talented. But then it really plateaued with Shedeur Smith. Shedeur Smith was a good player, good character guy, but just didn't make enough plays ultimately. And that was disappointing. And the Browns, I think, don't want to continue taking chances on these free agents. They got the dude from Tampa, Joe. I'm forgetting his last name, but there's a hyphen in there. I don't think that he's necessarily going to be the marquee guy the way Olivier Vernon, Clowney, and Smith were. I think that they're going to be rotating, and they're going to be rotating a lot with Isaiah McGuire and Alex Wright, because Alex Wright, before he tore his triceps, was really coming off to a good start in 2024, and he looked like he was making good strides. He was the reason, really the X factor for why the Browns got one of their 3 wins against the Jaguars when he had a strip sack in the end zone. Alex Wright was making good progress, but he tears his triceps early, very short after that Jaguars game, and that left the door open for Isaiah McGuire. And Isaiah McGuire, another guy who's under contract up through 2026, ending and becoming a free agent in 2027, he had a good end of the year, had a really, really solid run defense grade from PFF. I believe it was an 86.1 run defense grade, and a total 83.3 grade in general from PFF. So he took huge strides. And I think that, once again, if you can do this all within the building, if you can elevate guys and have them develop over 2-3 seasons and earn a second contract, and they can actually be contributors, that is just so much better, I think, for the culture, for the fit, and just in understanding what you're going to get with a guy. It minimizes the risk because you've seen this guy in your building. You have a way better cachet of what they are like as a locker room guy, as a player, in terms of their work ethic. So for either Isaiah McGuire or Alex Wright, one of these two guys is going to become potentially, if they perform, the opposite, the sidekick for Myles Garrett. And I think it's going to be a big battle. Alex Wright is a free agent after 26. So both of these guys have a ton to gain. If Isaiah McGuire shows out, they will let Alex Wright walk. If Alex Wright absolutely shows out, they will re-sign him, and they will still have McGuire for another year after that. And they can figure out what they want to do with that. But they're in a good position because they have two young guys under rookie contracts who are out there trying to earn a spot. So Isaiah McGuire, Alex Wright, I think have a ton. And now let's move on to our final player with the most to win, achieve, lock down in 2025. I don't think this is any surprise. It's Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur Sanders has the chance to finally get the Browns quarterback position solidified. We've seen the jersey. We are sick of adding names to it. We want our guy. Can Shedeur be that guy? I don't think it's going to be Dillon Gabriel. I think everything you're hearing out of training camp is that Shedeur is extremely talented. He's carrying himself well, and there's a feeling that this can be the guy. He's got a magnetism to him, and I know a lot of people are sick of talking about him. It's just going to be ramping up. We will try and stay balanced in this and that, and we are going to be dictated not by hype, but by what we see on tape. From everything I saw on tape, from the film breakdown that I posted on this channel, I see a winner. I see an extremely accurate dude, and I see a guy who can absolutely come out here and maximize his chance and become the solidified starter going forward. This helps the Browns out, obviously, in so many ways, because you get your quarterback finally. Then you have 2 first-round picks the following season who you can attack the receiver position with, adding more offensive talent, potentially offensive linemen if you need them. Maybe a guy like Caleb Downs, getting the best player ranked in the draft and locking up your back end with Grant Delpit. Like, there is a ton that works out for the better if Shedeur Sanders winds up being the guy. And there's a big if. But it just depends on what he does when he gets his chance. And he is going to get his chance. It will happen. He will have his opportunity to start. When I firmly believe that it's going to be week 7 against the Dolphins. I think that Joe Flacco should come out. He should start the year, and he should take on that gauntlet that includes the Lions, the Steelers, the Ravens, the Packers, and the Vikings. Cincinnati also week 1. But in terms of the great defenses that you're going to have to play in the NFL, that is most of them right there. And I think that a veteran quarterback who's taken the hits, taken the blows, should be the one starting off that season purely to protect your investment and to ease a guy in to give him the best possible chance to succeed. A lot of people think that when I'm saying that I don't want Shedeur to start. No, I want to protect the investment and give him the best chance to succeed. And I think that waiting until week 7 gives you that. I think if he comes out, plays well against the Dolphins, against the Patriots, you're going to have some momentum on your hands. And that will give him some runway to really go out there and prove if he is the guy or not. So I think he has probably the most relative to the value of position to gain over every one of the Browns roster. But those are my 5. I know it's more than 5 guys, but the 5 spots where I feel like guys have the most to gain. And it's going to be a really, really interesting offseason. So my people, we're going to get out of here on that. We got tons of videos coming. Like I mentioned, we'll be doing that Aaron Rodgers longer, more in-depth journalistic video soon where we're going to go deeper on Ian O'Connor's book, talk about, why I believe his career has been so criminally underachieving, and where you got usually 2 episodes per week coming out. So make sure you join. You can listen to the audio version down below. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It would really, really help. And be sure to tune in because there's much more to come. We will see you guys in the next one.